listen to that. Yeah, go Phoebe. What's going on? It's Jason Heath, and one of the most commonly requested orchestral excerpts is the Recitative section from Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. There's a lot in there besides that, but that's what we're going to look at in this video today. We're going to do it through this very cool site called String Virtuoso and through lessons by Phoebe Russell, who's one of my favorite people on the double bass. I'm going to go through, work on this, check this out, and of course I'll link up if you want to check out more content from String Virtuoso and about Beethoven and Phoebe. Let's dive in. I was on a concert with Phoebe Russell in 2019, and it was so cool to hear her warming up and hear her performing, and just the tone she gets out of the bass is absolutely incredible. And whether it's orchestral playing or solo playing, she's just one of my favorite people on the bass.
Between cellos and double basses, there's often a divide because this excerpt is so often played, but also everyone has worked on it so much and played it for auditions.
I have.
And so everything I say is probably the approach that I learned and worked on during my years in Berlin. So a lot of it is
Phoebe's principal bass of the Queensland Symphony right now, and just serious orchestral background for sure.
Germanic orientated, but of course there are so many different ways to approach this recitative.
Yeah, it's kind of cool being
a
French bow player
to be aware of in this
approaching
recitative is that whilst we can move with the tempo and play with a lot of vibrato, there needs to be a clear and overarching sense of rhythm or pulse throughout the entire piece. Of course, the excerpt doesn't need to be metronomically exact or in time, but it's just really clear that there is a sense of pulse, that we're not just playing faster and slower and randomly, but that we're clear on the beginning, on the phrase.
Yeah, that's an easy thing to have happen for people, especially when they're just starting out with this, is to like take time. Like generally you want to take time like you're stretching a rubber band. You don't want to go like crazy fast or slow, but this piece sort of leads itself to kind of weirdness sometimes.
So the journey and where it ends. Nothing in this excerpt should ever be hectic. I think we're either singing or speaking, and also it's important to differentiate between those moments. The moments that are speech, the interjections, the moments that interrupt, and then the moments where we're mimicking the singer and really sing.
I'll be interested to see if she describes how she describes the structure of this, because it's a very it's unusual for many reasons. It's funny because it's kind of one of the most famous pieces in the world, but it's also incredibly radically different from what came before it.
Singing and playing in a more lyrical manner. The tempo needs to be really clear right from the beginning of every entrance where we come in. We can move within each phrase, but at the beginning and the end of each section, it should be really clear what the rhythm and what the tempo is. Generally, in Beethoven's repertoire, we're looking for a round and resonant sound. So that's also something to be aware of when we're playing through this recitative, making sure that notes are resonant, full, and that the ends of notes are well looked after. So at the beginning of this excerpt, the first note, I leave a little bit of separation between the first and second note, but make sure that they really resonate into.
Is she going to do down or up? Oh, she's doing up. That's one of the most commonly asked questions for this, and I think maybe the Oscar Zimmerman books had down. I don't remember, but yeah, like she's doing. Conductors will do it differently depending on their approach. Versus.
And let's make sure this E is really full, but there's no crescendo, there's no movement within it. It's just one long E, one long line that leads us to the fourth bar of this excerpt. I remember my teacher always saying to me, make sure these quavers are really even. Put a word over
Quavers.
each one, like
I love
anger
British
to the gods.
terminology.
There's a lot of tension in this excerpt.
And if you're new to the bass, you don't know how much time a bass player with a classical background has spent working on these notes. And it's so interesting. It's kind of like playing solo Bach in a way where like everybody's got a different interpretation. Like Phoebe's saying in here, every orchestra has a different interpretation too.
And then this next entrance, we really can start to move, but not without control. So make sure when we move through a section, we've still got control of the movement.
Oh, I love that sound. That's something coming from her Berlin training, I'm sure. And it's something that, I'm a French bow player here, American, born and bred. I really love hearing that German bow and that Berlin approach. It's so cool.
Beginning to about here, I'd say that's where we're going towards. And then I really like to place this B flat. I think it should have a new intention, a warmer sound, a less full sound. And I like to play it on the D string to get a different character.
Oh, cool. Ooh, I like that. And then she does up the D string. That's
really
cool. I didn't learn it that way. Oh yeah, that's a great idea. Wow, very cool.
There's an accent on the top B flat, but I think that's more of a warm nudge, not a hard, aggressive accent. So we can color that note with vibrato. Nothing too crazy, but let's just aid the right hand and color it to make it more warm, more beautiful.
So interesting how people use different lengths and vibrato amount and everything.
Carrying on from the woodwind quavers. So we need.
Okay, so what happens here in the piece? If you're not familiar, well, go listen to the piece. It's a great piece, but if you might not pick up on it right away, there's this chaos at the beginning, and then Phoebe might talk about it. So I'll shut up now. I'll just keep playing.
To be really aware of the woodwinds before our entrance to make sure that we really join in on the end of it. I think of this as definitely spoken and not sung. So
cool.
Really well articulated, clear pronunciation.
Yeah, coming from the fact that it's a recitative, so spoken, not sung. Dun, dun, dun.
And then the next entrance, we can be more melodic, more lyrical, moving towards this top E flat. So we're all
nice. Ooh, okay, let me try that.
Always moving with a really clear sense of direction. First to the top E flat, and then through the next bar towards the C. And then at the end, this is a little bit marcato, really heavy.
Dun, dun,
no
dun,
diminuendo. I kind of see this, I guess it's a taste thing, and of course if you're playing this with orchestra, you need to go with what's happening, but I don't like to get too much slower here.
Cool. Here's the next part.
In this next entrance at figure 38, it's really important. I'm sure every teacher says this and every musician says this, but it's really important to differentiate between the forte on the F sharps and the fortissimo on the E flat.
How many times have I said that teaching lessons on this piece? A few times.
Of course, we can exaggerate the difference by playing a little bit less, maybe a little bit more separate on the F sharps. And then really sinking into the E flat. I think we'll get a bigger sound if we put weight into the E flat, but also remember to really open out the chest to let the note develop. We don't want to back away, but we also don't want to crescendo through this note. I think we just want one really full, even sound.
Sure. Oh, that's great. Yeah, something that I'm always trying to do with this is look at my contact point. Didn't like that. Make sure I'm getting closer to the bridge because you're going a foot almost, maybe roughly, and so you have to just adjust proportionally toward the bridge.
And then in this next section, every part's different, but traditionally the first three notes of this bar are slurred. And here too, these two. And I think personally I like that better. So if I'm playing for an audition, I go back to these traditional kind of bowings because it's easier to play with a long line.
Yeah, and so these string virtuosi I'll mention here, for these different string virtuoso pieces, they have typically, I think, I don't know if it's for every case, but from what I've seen so far, they have like an unmarked part, and then they have a part with Phoebe's markings or whoever's marking. So it's a good way to do it, just so you can see the information they want to convey on the page, but then you can play around yourself on a clean palette.
Played separately, it actually just makes it a lot harder.
Mm-hmm.
So we're really moving through here. And it continuously moving to here, where we start to back away. So where we've just reached the Ritardando, it's important not to rit too early because the tempo that we reach on the last two quavers of that bar is the tempo that we really have to stick with for the...
Yeah, so that's the thing that I've heard my entire bass playing career. That bar, you're thinking about the diminuendo bar, 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3. And so you've sort of made your bed by how much you slow down or don't slow down those eighth notes. So if you slow down too much, you're kind of like in a dirge tempo.
The poco adagio. So here I'm really thinking about those last two quavers and subdividing those bars. So once we hit the poco adagio, we don't get slower and we don't move with the tempo, we just stick with what we've got. This next entrance, tempo 1 again, before figure 55, let's make sure each of the notes is even. So I often think of...
And so what's really cool with all these entrances is that Beethoven is quoting the previous movements. So between he quotes the first movement. So it starts off just like the first movement, or similar to the first movement, and then there's that Phoebe was demonstrating. You go through that one, and then there's this and so that's a quote from the second movement, and then so on and so forth throughout these, which is kind of an interesting compositional technique, or quite interesting actually.
A brass-like approach, a trombone-like quality, resonant, full, but completely even. That's one of the reasons why I choose to keep it on one string, because I like to keep the same sort of timbre and same quality, rather than
that's what I've done my whole life.
Strings and getting a sort of different sound on the second note.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I've always done, but yeah. All right, picking up a lot here.
And then the next entrance again can be more melodic. And we can play with a really strong sense of movement and phrase. So let's give a little bit of space before we rest into this
all these different characters.
Nice. And then growing.
You can hear her breathing with the music. It's just such a natural
So we've really got this sense of moving
pacing
to the beginning of each bar here.
Nice.
A lot of the time it's easy to want to slow down because we're diminuendoing.
Yeah, but it doesn't say slow down.
And while some recordings do that and some orchestras do that,
also true.
Generally it's just a relaxation of the tempo rather than a real slowing down.
Yeah. Nice. I like these bite-sized chunk approaches too, by the way. It's kind of a cool way to digest
and this next entrance at bar 65 should really just emerge from the woodwind.
Kind of makes it seem more manageable.
Beforehand. I think we should basically just carry on from what's been happening before. Not starting anything completely new, but really just working with the melody that we've been past. I choose to play this almost senza vibrato to get a really dark, kind of tense sound. That way also, a couple of bars later, 4 or 5 bars later, where we continue, where we add in the vibrato, it adds a more dramatic effect. So for this entrance at tempo 1, play around with using less vibrato. If you do use vibrato, just use it to colour the line. But I wouldn't go for something too wild or romantic here. Let's really stay in piano as well. Make sure that it is metronomically exact. So I always have a point of reference when I'm playing this as an excerpt for an audition. I make sure that I pick a place in the piece that's a reference for the tempo. So before I start, for me, I think so I'm subdividing already before I begin.
It's a great way to think about it, actually. Really cool description.
You're always going to have one person on a panel, if you're playing this for an audition, that's sitting there subdividing and tapping. So don't give them any reason to fault you.
I may have been that person in the past.
The last thing is no crescendo, no diminuendo.
It's tricky not to.
Keep one long, smooth, flat line.
Yeah, that's one of those things that I've tried it both. I used to always do up here. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. I found that for me, the way I play, keeping away from this area was helpful. So I tried to not use all the bow, but there's so many different approaches. And of course, French bow versus German bow and just so many factors. Yeah, she kind of stops around here too. Cool. Maybe it's the same for French and German.
As we add in the vibrato and put more weight into the bow, I think it gives it a really beautiful effect. And I would say this B sharp is one of my favourite notes in the excerpt, but it should also be one of the most massive notes. So whatever you do, make sure you get your full body weight into this note and really look for resonance.
It's always one of the freakiest things for students learning this is it's oftentimes one of their first B sharps that they've run into, and so the fact that it is the equivalent of C natural can be kind of interesting for people. You can hear some very out of tune renditions of this as people are developing. I love how she sits on that note, very vocal.
And this top F sharp should be huge. Again, the same thing we were talking about, putting all the weight into the string, but then really opening up. And the left hand can aid that with a really full, warm vibrato.
I just love that sound
all
she
these
gets.
ends of
Full
phrases,
sound.
this one and the next one, the last one, that are two crotchets, make sure that they're really nicely packaged and even. I wouldn't actually taper too much on them. I would just keep them pretty even and exact. So for our last entrance in the recitative, it comes directly after the first inklings of the Ode to Joy. So that's the cool thing. I like the way for inklings of the Ode to Joy. So Beethoven gives you a recap of each movement, including the third movement. We didn't talk about that one. And now he's foreshadowing. It's like material you have not heard, that material that is yet to come. A playing. And we interrupt that.
Yeah.
So it has to be really clear that that's an interruption, especially when you're playing this in an audition and you don't have the orchestra there. It's important to make it clear that you know what's happening before you come in. So this is like the bass is saying, we're not ready, the Ode to Joy is coming later. But make sure that each of these notes are completely full. I do 2 down bows, also because that way I can make sure that each of them is even. Both of the notes should have the same
Make sure they're
length,
even.
the same sound quality, and the same dynamic.
That sound she gets.
And here we begin to sing again. So let's make sure we have a really nice full vibrato.
Love that vibrato.
And a really nice resonant sound in the right hand.
Sound.
I like to play this on the D string. Making sure that both of these two notes slurred are under one hand position. And then when we switch to the G string for this final phrase,
I love that
I think
vibrato.
it has more impact with the brightness. And you can
So
totally
nice.
indulge on that shift. I wouldn't do a gliss, but I'd make sure it's really singing and well connected.
Sure.
And take time over this harmony.
Full sound.
So let's really sing through this E and F sharp. And then, because we want to slow down towards the end, let's move a little bit now. So we can really slow down.
Yeah.
Through these quavers. And whatever
such a great
tempo
moment.
we reach on this C and B, we have to stick with through the long G. So be aware of that. Don't slow down too much or you'll run out of bow.
Listen to that. Yeah. Go Phoebe. That's a look at Beethoven 9 through the eyes of Phoebe Russell. If you enjoyed this video, check out what we've got linked up here. Thank you so much, and we'll see you in the next video.